Christian, you're so. I could have spoken to you for 2 or 3 hours. Okay, hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, Mirror Manga's Grimdark Buddies, and today I'm joined by a new Grimdark buddy, well new to me, but probably loads of you know this name. So this is Christian Dunn, welcome to the channel.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, and you also have another name, CZ Dunn?
CZ Dunn. Thanks to one of my wonderful voice actors when I was the audio producer at Black Library. Who the story behind that is that because the audio dramas are recorded in the English language, and many countries around the world speak a version of English.
Yeah,
we actually made a decision early on that we were going to go for Americanized pronunciations of certain words. So obviously, with Warhammer 40,000 having a lot of military ranks, we would say lieutenant instead of lieutenant. And one of the actors in particular took umbrage at this, and every time it came to reading that word, he would say lieutenant, and then me or the director would have to pick him up on it. So when it came to recording my first audio drama, he actually decided to get his revenge. So you record the audio drama, and then at the end you do all the wilds, and you'll do the credits. So when it came to recording the credits, it said malediction by CZ Dunn instead of CZ, and he kind of like looked at me out of the booth as if to say, haha, got you. And I'm like, actually, I like that, we'll keep it. So that's where it's CZ rather than CZ.
It's a pretty cool way to pick up a nickname. I approve. And yeah, I mean, big part of my journey into Warhammer is pronouncing everything wrongly, including, and to my most humiliation, Macaridge, the planet of the Ultramarines. But that's lovely, and I didn't even know, so that's exciting. So I can ask you about the voice acting and everything as well as part of this interview.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to take you far back to a different age, the Age of Darkness.
Yes.
It's 2011. In the UK, Prince William and Catherine get married, and Def Leppard, System of a Down, and Linkin Park headline Download Festival. Ooh. What were you up to in 2011?
I wasn't at Download that year. I do remember that much. So 2011, because of the nature of publishing, Age of Darkness was a distant memory for me. I was on to the next thing, and as I've already mentioned, the audio. I think at that time I was probably heavily entrenched in recording the audio dramas or abridging the first 3 novels so we could fit them on 5 or 6 CDs or whatever it was. But yeah, 2011, I think that was one of the sweet spots for the Horus Heresy. I think that was right in the middle of the run of the New York Times bestsellers.
Oh, yes.
Which obviously was quite exciting, plucky little publisher making these weird novels and anthologies based on this, war game, little toy soldiers, absolutely smashing it out of the park, hitting the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, it's absolutely immense. And, all these authors, that I meet are like New York Times bestselling authors. I really should use that label a bit more. That's really interesting because unfortunately, I don't have the attention for audiobooks. I have to read physically. But I didn't know that they got abridged. I guess I had never thought about it.
Yeah, so the way Games Workshop Black Library did the audios is they started off doing audio dramas. So a standard audio drama is where it's like a radio play, like The Archers or something like that. The way Black Library did it was slightly different. So we had the narration and a bit of dialogue, and it was always a single actor to start with. And then as time moved on, the budgets got bigger because they were obviously selling quite well. I think it was Raven's Flight by Gav Thorpe. That was the second best-selling audio book in the UK that year, after like J.K. Rowling or Dan Brown or something like that.
Yeah.
So they were doing really, really well. So off the back of that, we started doing audio books as well. But to start with, we decided that we wanted to do the opening trilogy for the Heresy. But at that time, CDs were still a thing. So we needed to be able to sell it on CDs. I can't remember if it was 5 CDs or 6 CDs, but you having to take like 140,000 word novel and condense it down into like 50, 60,000 words. So I drew the short. Well, I'd say I drew the short straw. I volunteered. I was the person running the audio at the time. So yeah, I had to take Dan and Graham and Ben's work and condense it down. And yeah, unfortunately, a lot of humans died during that process of abridging the novel. All of the remembrancers basically became Cindermen.
Just squish them, yeah.
Yeah. If one of the other characters was doing something, no, that'll have to be Cinderman now. And yeah, I mean, with anything that you abridge, if you're not familiar with the source text, it just kind of has to make sense in and of itself. It did. Obviously, it's nowhere near as good as the full version.
Yeah.
But it kind of did the job. And then we did the right thing a few years later, and they went back and recorded the full novels. So
amazing.
All's well that ends well.
Well, that just seems mad to me because whenever I talk to anybody, they're like, "Oh, Mira, in the old days, they used to have Black Library Convention, and the authors would be there in person." And you're telling me they used to have like plays with a cast. I mean, do we think the glory days could come back, Christian? That I do notice that whenever a new edition is released, everyone goes mad because they can't get their hands on it. Do we think we're too
I mean, nostalgia is a weird thing. So people say about the glory days now. The glory days, yeah, you can look at that as being the 8 or 9, however many New York Times bestsellers it was. The Horus Heresy at that time was becoming, a genuine publishing phenomenon. I think what's happened now is it's just a different kind of glory days. The stuff that's coming out now is a whole different bunch of authors. A lot of the guys who were doing, and the girls as well, who were doing the Heresy and 40K stuff back then. Some of them have moved on to other things. Some of them have moved on to bigger and better things. But there's still, a talent pool that's there now. And actually, there's a whole bunch of readers who are coming to Black Library now. And that is going to be their glory years in years to come. In 10, 15 years' time, they'll be like, oh, yeah, Black Library, it's not what it used to be, is it? And it's just going to be that constant cycle.
Yeah, so true. And also, we've got this Amazon thing coming up that it's going to be a TV Warhammer show. And I keep asking every author I ever talk to, are you working on this? Do you know anyone working on it? But it's lockdown tight. I mean, it's probably NDA city, but that's going to be exciting.
You probably have to sign an NDA not to talk about the NDA.
Yeah,
that's how serious that will be.
So lockdown, but I think it's fine. I'll just be massively overexcited when I discover it at the same time as every normal human. That's fine. So I have heard whispers because I did say to a few people, I'm speaking to Christian. What should I ask him about? And all my friends are my grimdark buddies are much more knowledgeable than me. So one of them, Nathan, said he used to edit Inferno. Did ask him did he work for White Dwarf? So could you tell us a little bit?
I didn't work for White Dwarf. So okay, you say what was I doing into that? Let's go even further back. Let's go back to let's go back to the year 2000. So in the year 2000, obviously it's a post-apocalyptic wasteland. The Y2K bugs happen. I don't know that. Middle of 2000, I took a job with Black Library as the assistant editor on Warhammer Monthly and Inferno. After a while, I actually became the editor of both of those publications. I think Inferno might have ran for slightly longer than Warhammer. Warhammer Monthly has the dubious distinction of, on the Friday, I went to a convention and we won the Eagle Award for Best British Comic. And I think it was like the first time in years that 2000 AD hadn't won it. Didn't get the award, man. For some reason, they cancelled the award ceremony. And I found out on the internet the next day that we'd won it. They never sent that huge statue to us. So I went back to the office on Monday, we won the award, to get called into a side room and said, we're shutting Warhammer Monthly down. So going from that peak to that trough very, very quickly. So after that, I did Black Flame for a while, and then I also edited the Necromunda novels for Black Library. We did Dark Future novels, Blood Bowl novels. I did that for a few years, and then Games Workshop decided that, hey, we're doing really, really well at this publishing stuff, working on our own IPs and bringing in stuff from like New Line Cinema, 2000 AD, and other places. Why don't we start a proper publishing imprint? So they set up Solaris with Mark Gascoigne, who you may know from Fighting Fantasy, one of the founders of Black Library. So set up Solaris, and the remit there was to go out and find, great novels from people who weren't working in pre-established universes. So we were discovering some new authors, we were working with some established authors. So Ed Greenwood, who you know from the creator of the Forgotten Realms, Dungeons and Dragons, we published some of his non-D&D novels. At one point, we were publishing Brian Lumley in the UK, which was just like a dream come true for me. James Lovegrove, we were publishing. I think we published a Conrad Williams novel at some point. So some like really, really great authors. We did that for a few years, and then it was going really, really well. And again, I came into work one day, got called into probably the same side room.
No.
And somebody said, oh, yeah, we've decided that we don't want to bother with publishing other people's novels. We're going to sell Solaris. So that's what they did. They sold Solaris to Rebellion, owners of 2000 AD, who, they're still it's going from strength to strength every year. And that meant that I was looking around for something to do. So they said, well, come back and work for Black Library, work on Horus Heresy, do like the anthologies, but also do you want to do this audio stuff as well? So that's what I did for a few years. And then with the audio, that became a proper full-time job. So I'd be going down to London. There was 1 month where I was going down to London so much that Google Maps defaulted to the Travelodge on Drury Lane as my home address. My bank phoned me up to say, would you like to change your branch to the Oxford Street branch? And Starbucks on Wardour Street actually had me in the running for Customer of the Month because I was in there. So, and at that point, we kind of, a bunch of us at Games Workshop put heads together. It's like, maybe we should just like build a recording studio in Nottingham.
That was you.
So it was actually the guy who drove it was a guy called Paul Lyons, who he left Games Workshop a few years before I did. But yeah, they spent a ton of money and built this recording studio. And the first day that recording studio was open and ready for us to use, I handed in my notice at Black Library and went to work for the licensing team at Games Workshop.
No.
Yeah.
Well, everyone turns traitor in the end.
Exactly. Yeah. I was Alpha Legion all along.
Oh, there you go. You're Alfarius. So that's so funny because I spoke to Steve Conlin, who's a voice actor, and I've heard rumors about this fabled recording studio that is in Nottingham, and to me that's just so exciting that the IP becomes so big that you could build that down there. But then you were off at Games Workshop, and what was your job at Games Workshop?
So I was in the licensing team from, I think it was 2014 through to 2020. So I started off licensing video games. So all of those great games. At one point there was a big thing in the media. It's like there are too many Games Workshop video games, and it's like, and that's a bad thing, really. So I did that for a few years, and then Games Workshop decided they wanted to do some consumer products licensing, and also at that time the role playing game and tabletop games license had come back. So it was a case of going out and do that. So I spoke to Cubicle 7, managed to get them set up with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and all those great things. And then, some of the consumer product stuff that came out of it as well. And I did that up until 2000. And then 2 days before the UK got put into COVID lockdown, that's when I started my new job at Asmodee.
Christian, I've untapped the gold mine of someone who's doing absolutely everything in the whole Warhammer universe. I had no idea. So this is how the heresy introduces me to people. That's so exciting. My Grimdark buddies are very keen for me to play Rogue Trader.
Cracking RPG.
I have downloaded it. It's on my Mac. I've managed to make my PlayStation 4 controller work with my Mac. I already hate it. There's going to be loads and loads of fighting. If I could have a Warhammer game that was just the cutscenes and then you just talk to them like Monkey Island or that would be my jam. But So exciting. I'm sure, Christian, I'll be calling you back to talk about anything else. This is so exciting. But today we should stick to Age of Darkness.
Yes, of course.
So, I mean, I now I'm coming into my 50s in a couple of years. I now have started editing. I'm editing a game called Trench Crusade, which is really, really bloody. So yeah, getting into the gore a little bit more. How did you step into editing, and what's it like when you're wrangling not only one, but a handful of like authors that are really beloved in the genre? Yeah. How did you get into editorship, and then yeah, what's it like working with
So
those library authors?
before Games Workshop, I actually did business to business publishing. I was the editor of a dental magazine, or a dental laboratories magazine,
Wow.
which I did for a couple of years, and
I
I
literally
did everything
went
on
to
that.
my hygienist today. It's fate.
I did everything on that. Other than the typesetting, I was able to get a freelancer to do that. But yeah,
Mm.
I'd collate all of the content. I'd sell the advertising, liaise with the printers. So I'd got a fairly good grounding in editorial and the more logistic technical side of publishing. So I took the job at Games Workshop. As I say, I edited Inferno for a while. So
Mm.
editing for Inferno, there's the actual fun editing, which is talking to the authors, getting the pictures from them,
Mm.
getting the stories out of them, editing them, working with them to make some great stories. And then there's the kind of the more mechanical side of it, and it's like putting together the table of contents, making sure that you've got all of the content at the right
Mm.
time. So you do that for a few years, and you kind of get into a real routine with it. And it does become almost like a mechanical process when you're doing it. But then obviously you've got that creative process on top of that, which
Yeah.
is actually generating the work. So when I went off and did the Black Flame and the Solaris stuff, I wasn't really doing any short story
Yeah.
work. It was all commissioning novels. So the really exciting thing about coming back to working, for Black Library and doing that was actually the anthologies, because editing an anthology like this, compared to doing a month or a bi-monthly magazine,
Mm.
it's great.
Yeah.
Yes, you do have a deadline, and even in the case of Age of Darkness, there were a couple of authors who really pushed that deadline. Again, I'm not going to name names,
Don't
but
know names.
they know who they are. They know exactly who they are. So yeah, it's done that wrangling with something like Age of Darkness. It was up until that point, it was probably the most themed thing that I'd ever edited. Prior to that, we'd done I don't know, like Heroes of the Space Marines. Well, that all Space Marines are heroes, so that's just a whole bunch of Space Marines. I mean, there was some great stories in there, and that actually it really hung together well as an anthology. But Age of Darkness, there was more of a purpose to it.
Mm.
We were kind of at that point in the heresy where it was a bit of a crossroads, if you like. So you had the original opening salvo of the heresy. We'd done all the stuff on Prospero. I'm sure you've been told by some of the other people you've had on here. There were the summits that we used to have every once in a while, where the
Yes,
authors and the editors
they called
would.
themselves. It was when like the High Lords of Terror would gather.
There you go.
Oh, were you
There
in
you go.
those meetings?
I would. So I kind of I was there at the beginning.
Yeah.
I was there the day that they
May the
decided to
Emperor
do the
died.
Horus Heresy sort of thing, and then I went away, and then I came back. So literally the first meeting that we ever had before Horus Rising had been decided, I was in that meeting. I think I was in the second meeting as well. Then I went off and did all this other stuff, and then I came back. So what was Age? Was it like the 17th or 18th book in the
Let me
series?
find. Well, this is one of the blessings of these books. Age of Darkness. I think it is 16 or 17. You're right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of got away. So in those years, have been all of these other books that come out, and there've been a lot of stuff that was happening in the in the heresy, and then there was all this stuff that was going to come in the heresy that had been
Yeah.
decided as part of these High Lords of Terror summits. So what we were doing here is we were kind of putting a cap on that first part of the heresy.
Mm.
We were introducing some of the situations and concepts that were going to come up further on into the heresy. But just as importantly, we were making sure that people were in the right place. So some of those stories They're great stories, but actually the driver behind them was making sure, well, hang on, we need to get this guy over here, and we need to get this guy over here, and we need to see what this guy's been doing. So there was an element of that as well.
Wow.
But ultimately, yeah, it was nice to actually have a focus. So rather than just saying to somebody, send me a synopsis, just pitch me a story, it was more a case of, right, this story needs to do this. Other than that, go crazy and send me something. But yeah, there were certain beats that everybody were having to hit with those stories.
Yeah, oh, that is fascinating, and it makes me love it so much more. The fact that someone was there with the red string and all the photos. This Primarch needs to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah, because someone had written, Broken Toaster is his Grimdark buddy name, but he's actually called Matt. How did the
right.
stories for the compilation get chosen? Some taken from existing stories, or they all commissioned? But it
Yeah.
sounds
So
like,
we had an absolutely great starting point. So normally with any anthology, you want to have like your anchor story. You need to have like your big name author or the big event story that's going to be in there. We already had that because we had Little Horus. Now, again, my memory might fail me here. I think Little Horus had originally been done as an ebook original, or possibly even like a chapbook at an event, or something like
mhm.
that. So we had that story already. So great. We've got a Dan Abnett story, and it's about Little Horus, and it's about how Little Horus's face gets messed up. Brilliant, great. We could just publish that. Let's just put that out as the anthology, and it will still sell absolutely gangbusters. But so that was a nice platform on
Yeah,
which to base it. And then around that, we needed to make sure that it wasn't a case of we wanted to get all of the legions in there. There are a couple of legions who are quite notable by their absence,
mm,
but we wanted to not double up if possible. And again, there's an element of that. We're never going to get away from it.
no,
So you wanted that nice spread of the legions, and again, you wanted the established authors to be in there, but also, and again, this is more where it was more collaborative, working with some of the other editors. Everybody kind of had the authors that they were developing, and there were some authors in this anthology who had never written for the Horus Heresy before. So a couple of them in particular, the editors have come to me and said, right, this is their audition piece for the Heresy. If they can do a great short story here, they're going to end up doing novels. So there are at least 2 stories in there that are like that.
yeah.
And then there's the wild card in there as well, and that's Mr. John French. So
Oh,
John French worked at Games Workshop at the time. I think at that point he was already in the licensing team, and I then joined the licensing
mm.
later and worked with John. But John was like one of my he was one of my people who I was working with. He'd approached somebody else in Black Library, and they said, "Hey, work with Christian. He'll work with you." And I think at that point he might have done 1 or 2 Warhammer 40,000 short stories. And at that time, Games Workshop were doing the Games Day events over in Birmingham. So the way that worked was on a Sunday morning at some ridiculously early hour, every single member of staff turned up at Lenton HQ, and we boarded what normally were quite luxurious coaches. This particular year, I remember it being a quite crappy old double-decker bus. And it was raining as well, so it wasn't the most pleasant of things. But what made the journey to Birmingham really, really great was I sat next to John French.
Oh,
And I was sat near the window, so I couldn't get away from him. And I think that was planned because he sat there and he pitched this absolutely amazing concept for a Horus Heresy short story. Now, at that time, the Horus Heresy was by invitation only. And he hadn't been invited. He'd kind of invited himself at that point. But it was such a good pitch, such a great concept. I kind of had to go into bat for him. So when we were sat around in editorial meeting, I said, "Look, I'm going to commission." And like, "Oh, are you sure? He's Johnny. Oh, he's only done it." It's like, no. John's great. This short story is going to be great. I've got every faith in John in doing this. And he repaid that faith. It's one of my favourite stories in that anthology. He went on to do some amazing Warhammer 40,000 stuff, some really great Horus Heresy stuff. And it's because he basically just sat next to me on a bus at 6 in the morning on a rainy
oh,
Sunday on the way to Birmingham.
that's a fantastic story, and I have got such a soft spot for the remembrances. God bless
Yeah.
them. Most of them come to a sticky end. That's so nice. It's beautiful, like talking to you, because as I speak to everybody, it's putting all the jigsaw pieces together. So anyone who's watched the author videos to this point will be fist pumping, I'm sure. So thank you so much. Yeah, I just went on a British Fantasy Society retreat, so I'm using the notebook they kindly gave me. So you're also an author because you've written
Yes.
two Dark Angels books, Malediction and Dark Vengeance. Is that right?
So Malediction is an audio drama, but I think there is a prose version that kicks around. Dark Vengeance was the novella that tied into I forget which, it was one of the editions of Warhammer 40,000, the starter set. The novels I did were Pandarax and
Okay.
Eye of Ezekiel. Yeah, I mainly wrote about Dark Angels.
And so please excuse me, that was probably one of the many Warhammer wikis that drove me down the wrong path. But so we have an ADB, Aaron Dembski Bowen Dark Angel story in this, Savage
Yep,
Weapons.
yep.
And did that give, when you are set to write about the Dark Angels, what are the, do you get like a one sheet and it's like the Dark Angels must always be miserable in would ADB's story in Age of Darkness influence you when you're coming to it later? Do you have to do all the reading? How does that work?
Yeah, so with the Dark Angels, in the earlier days of Black Library, because there wasn't a huge amount of output, it was growing. Every author kind of had like a chapter that they would work on. So
Mm.
Bill King would do Space Wolves, for instance, and Gav would do Dark Angels, and then Graham did Ultramarines, and then Nick did Salamanders. Over time, as Black Library needed to publish more content, more authors came on board. You couldn't really stick to that. So Gav had obviously done his Dark Angel stuff. I did the Dark Vengeance novella. Really, really liked the character of Balthazar, who was the lead in that, or one of the lead characters in that. And decided that I wanted to run with that character and do a different take on the Dark Angels. Gav was already doing such a great job. It's like I could emulate that, but what's the point in that? I'll go and do my own thing. So I think with me, my Dark Angels were more. Are they traitors? Aren't they traitors? Are they? They've got all these successors, but are they still a legion? But in all but name that I was playing more on that kind of thing. So I got this really like intricate web going of Balthazar would appear in a Death Watch story, and something would happen in there that kind of like tip me off. Things would happen in Pandarax. Was actually, I think it was set in like 999 M41, right at the end of where the timeline was at the point. And then Eye of Ezekiel was set earlier, so I could show Balthazar when he was, a younger
Yeah,
space marine, and stuff like that. But yeah, it was more a case of wanting to write about that particular character,
yeah,
and kind of focusing on that. And then the Dark Angels was just kind of like the wrapper that this character came in, if you
got
see what
it.
I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One of the difficulties with writing Space Marines is all of the Space Marines have their own individual kind of like personalities and traits. And if you're actually following the letter of the law, LORE,
Yeah,
you're not really supposed to deviate. So that doesn't always make for the most interesting stories if you've got like 1,000 dudes who are exactly the same as each other.
yeah,
It's like they're literally interchangeable. So you have to try and do a bit more with them. Not breaking the law, but
yeah.
sometimes you do have to stretch it a little bit and probably give a different take on things.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. In my mind, I imagine that there is, when you're accepted to become a Black Library author or a writer, you are handed a little tome and and it's like, this is exactly what, no?
No, no. So it's in one of the big parallels when I worked as an editor in Black Library and one of the license managers in licensing is people will say to you, "Oh, can we have the law books? Can we have all like the brand bibles and stuff like that?" It's like, yes, here you go. And what you would do is you'll give them every single codex ever printed or every
Oh,
single armor book. No, because literally that's it. There's no there's no real secrets. Obviously, you've got like the games developers working in
Yeah.
the studio who are working a few years ahead, and yes, they've got access to a more updated version of the rules or the codex or something. But everything that's printed, that is the lore, that is the universe, and every time they print a new rulebook or a codex or whatever that may be, it adds to the lore, or sometimes it changes the lore, and sometimes it retcons the lore. Not that they would ever admit to that. But so that is the material. So everything that the reader had as their in universe material, that's exactly the same thing that the writers had access to, and that's what made it great with things like Inferno, that we had an open submissions policy for the longest time. And the material that Dan and Gav and Graham and Jim had access to, that was the same material that people like Mark Collins, who's now working for Black Library, had access to, or Sarah Corkwell, or people like that.
But now, if you go to write for Black Library, they're like, here are all the codexes. Like, that was like several months of reading for sure.
Yeah, and also it wouldn't be but if you were a brand new author, Black Library wouldn't send you all of the codexes. There was a certain element of you'd have to go off and do some of your own research to actually get your foot through the door, sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, in the case of Pandarax, I was quite fortunate because I was working within Games Workshop, and I was able to just literally walk upstairs and sit down with, like, I don't know, Jervis or Marco or whoever it was at the time, and he could explain to me what Pandarax is, and it's like, yeah, this is great. I think I want to novelize this, and then literally go back downstairs and say, Mr. Editor, can I write a novelization of this?
Wow, that is, yeah. I mean, it's in your blood. You've been immersed in it all. So, so when this is all going on in 2011.
Yep.
Obviously, we've got, it's not the year of faxing and, we've got email and everything. Would you have these authors come in, or was it all very much, did the authors get to know what each other were writing, or was it all very much emailing and keeping it all separate?
So the High Lords of Terror summits, the meetings, did a lot of the heavy lifting. A lot of stuff got decided in those meetings, and then it was down to the various editors to make sure that was followed up on and followed through with all the stuff that was promised, and then doing that coordination between the different authors and making sure that if I don't know, Jim or Aaron or whoever had submitted a manuscript, that once it was in a place where it could be shared, that it was then shared with all of the other authors, so that they weren't contradicting each other or stepping on each other's toes. Hang on, you've killed that character. He's like the lead character. We wanted to try and avoid that wherever possible, unless it was intentional, of course.
Oh gosh. Well, yeah. I mean, what else is less? I mean, there's so much intention death. Even though I never get used to it. I mean, yeah. I mean, one of the stories did make me cry in this, which was, I was really shocked. It was The Iron Within.
Okay.
Which is loyalist Iron warriors. And then there's this lovely old poet / warrior who gets put in a dreadnought, saves everybody, gets a missile up the back, quite a few missiles up him. And they get him out of the dreadnought, pick him up, carry him away. And it was a brilliant story. It was really full of strategy. And there's a whole upside down. I mean, I'm telling you, you edited it. And then right at the end, this poor old poet is pulled out. He's got no legs. He's got all wires and everything. And he dies. And that was Rob Sanders.
Yep.
I just wrote a tweet because I do like to address the authors and let them know about the trauma. And I said, Rob, I don't know who you are or why you've done this to me, but we need to talk about Vastapol. And there's quite a lot of different vibes to the stories and the energy in these books as well. Because we have fantastic Primarch fight, smashing each other up in savage weapons. Then we have
intentionally left until the end of the anthology.
That was a huge build, and then Primarch smackdown. So yeah, really enjoyed that. We've got Graham's Rules of Engagement, which is very, very much oh my God, what's going to happen? And then you're like, oh, it was a bait and switch, Graham.
And again, intentionally, the first story in this is what I'm saying. So although we had this great theme, when all the stories came in, I wouldn't say it was obvious the order that the show, but there seemed to it just kind of like appeared to me out of the mist that there is an order that these stories should go in, and
Yes.
these are the bookends, if you like, and this is the order that the others should go in. I think my biggest nervousness was there was a similar twist, a bit of a bait and switch with the first and the second stories,
Yeah.
but actually Jim's story didn't it mentioned Space Marines, but there's no Space Marine on screen,
Yes,
if you
yes,
like. So
yes.
that's why I felt I was okay to go second with that one.
Yeah. Well, I've my t-shirt today is ultramarine blue with my little Mournival design because we get Mournival, like we get little
Yep.
Horus, we get a couple of ultramarines. But I did feel a flow to the stories, and it gave enough space for different emotions to kind of, it wasn't like, it really was kind of like very lift you up and like a bit of hope, smash the hope. This one's going to make you cry. But I loved
Yep.
what you saw with my point of view is rules of engagement. You saw Graham do very, very clever tactical stuff with that, overheads, all these different machinations, and you've got to trust your Primarch. And then you get the best of Jim, which is him and the spy novel, the subversive operative, the sneaky agent, two of their, I'd say wheelhouse is next to each other. I thought that worked really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, both of those stories play to the real strengths of the author. So, I mean, Graham he's an amazing Warhammer 40,000 author. But whenever he gets on the Heresy, he really does raise his game. Really does raise his game. In fact, Rules of Engagement, probably not my favourite Graham Heresy. I think the one that he did for the Primarchs, which hopefully we'll get to talk about later, the Reflection Kraken, I think it was called. That is a really good piece of fiction, a really, really good piece of fiction.
I think,
But Graham is, he's still on top form here. Really, really great story. And again with Jim, Jim, there are a lot of authors who are out there who work on multiple different franchises, multiple different IPs. Jim, I first encountered Jim when he was working on Black Flame. So he'd done the Butterfly Effect novelization, and he'd done some other work for Black Flame. Some really, really phenomenal stuff. And then he came to Black Library. In fact, I think I was the first. It was Inferno. I think I was the first Black Library editor to work with him. Published him in Inferno. But any IP, any lore, any franchise that he sets his mind to, he's great. He instantly gets it, and he puts his own stamp on it. And this, it not only is it him really, really getting what makes the hero, it's him writing the kind of story that Jim absolutely excels at. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great when you've got, sanguineous, smacking,
yeah,
thousand sons of Horus or whatever it is, right? He's great at doing that. But actually, when he's doing that more subtle, like you say, the spy fiction almost. Really, really good. Again, another one of my favorite Jim stories.
yeah. I mean, I had a thrilling moment. Jim was at Dragon Meet and popped over to the Game Therapy UK stand to see me. And he's just, when he can be such a bubble of enthusiasm, and he started reading to me to one of the later heresy books that I'm going to come to. And I just got this tingle down the back of my spine because you're right. He has this, he can really tune in and get like, the little subtleties of spying, but also, sometimes he's had to do really big events, that are like everyone's expecting to read, and reading those massive events. Yeah. I mean, whenever I speak to the authors, I am completely bowled over, and I'm always humbled because in my head, before I kind of got into the books, I was like, they're plastic soldiers, but the authors really are. I mean, they're fantastic. They're twisting your emotions. And again, I feel very abashed at this, but it's really opened my mind to Warhammer fans because they're reading these novels, feeling all the same emotions. But when you're in a crowded game club and they're just all shouting at each other and brandishing their tape measures, you wouldn't know that the depths,
It's interesting because around about this time, I'm not going to be too disparaging to say it was the height of Black Library fandom, because I'm sure Black Library fandom's great at the moment. But at that time, I think it was the bolt hole, the Black Library bolt hole was a big thing. And there was a whole bunch of people who had come together on the Bolt Hole, many of whom actually became authors for Black Library. Some of them even ended up working for Black Library. And there was that real community spirit. And like you say, there were events. So the Black Library Weekender was the first one in 2000, or maybe it was a bit, but it was around about the time of the Black Library Weekender.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was this real, in real life community that built up around it. And this community spirit of people, bonding together over, exactly what you say, words written about little plastic men.
It's fabulous, and I'm so glad I get to speak to you because it's someone else who can see what when I'm speaking to the authors. It's so exciting, and you've got to handle those words and thread them in. I'm just aware of the time, so
Sure.
I'm sorry. This always happens. I get overexcited.
No, it's fine.
So that we have Forgotten Sons by Nick Kine,
Yes.
which is my
Yep.
first salamandery moment, and one of my worst, most horrible things. Just read out a little bit. Cease with your questions. The ultramarine turned his steel gaze on her, and Persephone shrank a little. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I was trained to question when I was asked to remember. Arcades looked away, his face like stone. Not anymore, he stated flatly, and resumed his vigil outside the broken ship, which really summed up it is the age of freaking darkness.
Yep.
Trump's got voted in. Remembrances no more. And I loved learning about the salamanders, and getting everyone off Istvan and all the sorrow and the loss. I thought that was really, that's my first Nick Kime experience as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I was Nick was an editor at Black Library at the time as well. I was an editor, so he was my editor, I was his editor, sort of thing. It worked out quite nicely like that.
Yeah, that worked good.
Yeah, and I'd worked with Nick previously. Again, my first time round with Black Library, and he'd done some stuff for Inferno, done some novels as well. I think, did he work for White Dwarf before he worked for, probably something like that. But yeah, Nick had really stopped playing this for doing Salamander stuff. So he's doing Salamanders in 40k. So he was like the logical choice to do Salamanders in the Heresy. And again, he was in the room for all of those High Lords of. So it wasn't like, you were getting an extra body in. He was there, and he was taking all that stuff on board. And again, this story, I think you've hit the nail on the head. That one passage, that's almost like this is no longer the Great Crusade. This is what is becoming more like Warhammer 40,000 is going to be. And I think he got to the nub of that in this story.
The creeping dread is coming. I mean, I kind of quite naively took on the book thinking, oh yeah, we'll continue the heresy. But it almost is like this is a break to just express how things, let's just take a breather and breathe in the dread and, how everything is going black. And I thought that was really, really powerful. And then we go into the last Remembrancer.
Yep.
Which, again, it's very contemplative, and there's this one line of text which really, it's Rogel Dawn realizing what's going on, and he's killed poor Solomon Voss, and then he sees one line of text that Solomon was writing. I have seen the future, and it's dead. And I mean, I love it when in the microcosm we're learning about, well, this is happening everywhere now. And again, I think that's my first John French. So well done on that bus ride. And
I mean, so the joke of this is Rogel Dawn is probably my favorite Primarch. I don't mind admitting that. Rogel Dawn, my favorite Primarch. My least favorite Legion / chapter, Imperial Fest. Can't stand them. Cannot stand the little yellow button. No. I think Rogel Dawn was too good for his Legion. There you go. That's the one controversial statement I'm going to make on this.
That'll be the clickbait YouTube. And then we have one of my faves, Chris Wright, and I think I fell in love with Chris Wright because he's done a gumshoe detective with his Bloodlines detective stories, Warhammer Detective, which kind of made me feel I'm really quite aligned with all those classic, I'm going to forget his name now, Philip Marlowe detective. Right. I love John. I love Jim because I'm very into like John le Carre and all of that. So it was nice to get something, and I thought, oh, this is going to be fabulous. I love Chris Wright. Intelligent, kind man. Absolutely not. I mean, I've done a 40-minute video just addressing him. This is horrible. I mean, and I wrote down a quite a I don't know, I thought it was a clever question. How do you punch up a prolonged torture chapter? She's just this poor sod getting beaten up. It put me in mind of the horrible. There's another horrible short story where Angron's been locked in a room and all these captains are going in one by one to say, "Hi, Dad, we're your legion," and he just kills them all until he gets to Khan. But yeah, how do you keep? I mean, obviously it's a great story because it's so tense and horrible. But how do you find like when it's just prolonged beating? What's your editing tips around that?
Yeah, so with an anthology, you have the luxury of getting different voices and different takes. So not all of the stories are going to be violence, 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 violence. And I think it's fair to say in this story, it's not just continual violence. Yes, there are some quite nasty passages in there,
Yeah,
but I think it's got a real good pacing to it. There's some nice beats there. I mean, the notion of violence, we always had to tread quite a fine line with
yeah,
the Warhammer 40,000 and the Heresy stuff. And I think it's fair to say with the Heresy, we were able to stop pushing things a bit more. I think the Heresy was always perceived to be a bit more adult than. I mean, the Warhammer 40,000 novels are adult novels. They're not young adult. I know they did a kids range. They're not kids books. Whereas I think that the Heresy, we kind of were able to step it up just a little bit more. Now, it wasn't going to be, full on torture porn or anything like that.
yeah. No, it's,
Um,
it's not quite that bad.
Not quite that bad, but moving in that direction,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I mean, I'm always so proud of myself, and I always think you wouldn't read it unless the author is fantastically skilled and also giving you the feels within that. So, there's just things like the bones already weakened, crunch inwards. I feel the back of my head drive a dent into the metal floor, and the hot stickiness of the blood in the well as it rebounds out again. And then, I stick with it because Chris Wright has got such a gentle, amazing turn with the words. And he goes, when the fist lands, that is what I'm thinking. There is no comfort in it. And of course, there will be no comfort in anything again. So, I mean, it's worth it. It's worth the agony.
But again, just taking that line in isolation, there'll be no comfort in anything again. It's coming. It's the age of darkness.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're so clever, these boys, just, getting everything together. I mean, yeah. Sorry, this happens a lot. I will wax lyrical.
No, no, no. So I think just another point about this story. And again, this is my memory failing me here. I can't remember if this story was supposed to fix a timeline issue or whether it caused a timeline issue. I'm sure somebody will point that out to me in the comments. But I just get the feeling that Khan being there was either to make or break, or it broke something. I can't remember.
It broke me, so that's succeeded. And then we have Gav Thorpe, my
Yep.
first Gav Thorpe as well. The face of treachery. And all of this building up like who can trust who? You know, I mean, I'm so excited to talk to Gav Thorpe.
So this story was, I think it was a sequel to a couple of, certainly Raven's Flight, the audio drama that I mentioned earlier. This kind of follows on from the events that were outlined in that. And again, it's one of those stories where it's making sure that you're getting people into the right place and you're kind of tying up a loose end. One of the things I say about Gav, it's always great when you see Gav's name on a table of contents. Because, and I really don't mean this disparagingly, I know exactly what I'm going to get from a Gav Thorpe story. When Gav Thorpe sent me a synopsis, and it would be like an 800,000 word synopsis for a 10,000 word, I could almost read that story in my head before he's delivered it. Absolutely consistent, always, really, really high standard. A man who knows Warhammer 40,000 Horus Heresy inside out as well.
Yeah.
And again, I'd obviously worked on Raven's Flight, so I've got a bit more of a connection to this story and a real soft spot for it.
Oh, yeah, and finally I now get, because I've read Legion, and now I get the whole I'm Alfarius. Like sneaky, sneaky Legion. I thought,
Yeah.
and I'm like completely unexpecting it, so I love that twist. And I'm really excited to learn about the Raven Guard as well because as somebody who's starting from 30K, I'm kind of being drip fed. So this is a really lovely taster to get a little taste. And then, oh my God, Little Horus, which
Yeah.
I think I sent you my video with Dan, and
Yes.
my God, like I don't know where Dan's brain comes from or how it operates, but I really felt this was such a treat because so much stuff was going on. The poetic words, the horrible, the nature of the face getting slashed off, the hidden ghosts, all of this stuff. I really love Little Horace. And yeah, I hear what you're saying about, that could have been a thing in its own right, really.
Yeah, you have to be very very careful with anthologies like this in this kind of series that you've got to tell stories that are meaningful, but you don't want to tell stories that could have been a novel. And actually, I think in retro at this point, and again, I'm giving away secrets here. At this point in the Horus Heresy, whatever we're 16, 17, 18 books in, there's only supposed to be about another 15, 20 books at this stage. And it's after this point that people decided that we want to do more books. So I think it's fair to say that there are some of the stories in here, maybe they could have been expanded into novels. I think this one, this is an important event
Yeah.
in a character's life story,
Mm.
and it is worthy of having that platform. As I say, this story had already been published. But that, like you say, it's 2011. People are still wary of Kindles and things like that. So there
Yeah.
will be a lot of people who have who claim to be heresy fans who will not have bought this story on principle because it only exists as zeros and ones, and will have
Mm.
been waiting for this anthology. So it's nice that even though it's a reprint, it's still going to be new to the vast majority of people picking this book up.
Yeah, it is great. It's great. I mean, yeah, I think I just want Dan to adopt me. I think that's what would be my happiest outcome. And then we've spoken a little bit about the Iron Within,
Yep.
which just shocked me because I really enjoyed what is essentially a siege story. And I didn't think I'd ever be rooting for Iron Warriors as well. So
They're good Iron Warriors. They're nice ones.
yeah, I know it's just I don't know what it is. I mean, I feel I've been tricked and trashed in so many books to this point that I'm like a little bit battle
Oh,
shy.
you probably want to stop reading the Heresy right now. Then don't read beyond this point.
I don't know what I've gotten into. The other thing that really worries me is we get a mention of Night Lords in here. If I ever get to 10K subscribers, everyone wants me to read a Night Lords book. And I've been really heavily advised against that because of the horribleness. I thought I did well getting through Fulgrim, to be honest. So
Okay, okay.
we'll see. I think I'm committed till I get to the end of the heresy, and then hopefully there won't be like another, oh, we're starting the heresy again. But can you imagine the alternate universe of the heresy? But
I couldn't possibly comment. I suspect somebody's maybe has already had a conversation in that direction within, the hallowed halls at Lenton.
you never know, you never know. And then we've got Savage Weapons with ADV, the amazing
Yep.
Aaron, who can't talk to me really because he's still in the thick of all his work there. So I can't entice him onto my channel because he's obviously in the thick of it. But such a great writer. And again,
Yeah.
who can write those really big, Primarch figures and make them feel human and give them like the pride and the aggression and the subtle like the failings of them as well and make it feel really real. And then you end up feeling like, but they're brothers, it's so sad.
Demigods with daddy issues. That's what they are.
They are. I need to make that t-shirt. But yeah, I mean, it was way more than just Primarch smash. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So people are going to come for the Primarch smash, but they're going to stay for the rich narrative that he layers around it, because it isn't just Primarch's smashing phase.
No.
It's mainly Primarch's smashing phase, but there is more to it. And again, it's setting up themes and situations that are going to become more important for further down the
Yeah.
line. This was actually my first. I'm pretty sure it was my first interaction with ADB. What was it? What was his Imperial? Was it Cadian Blood? Was that his first novel? I remember I went on a weekend hiking trip and took Cadian Blood and I think I just read it on the minibus on the way there. I just wouldn't put that story down. It was
Yeah.
absolutely amazing, and there was a bit of buzz around ADB at that time. Like I say, I wasn't that familiar with him. So yeah, really, really excited to get this story out of him. Again, not giving too much away. I'm not sure that this was late, but I think I might have made him late with something else as a result of that. But hey,
Oh,
it was worth it.
yeah, it was. Well, I'm so, so grateful that we could spend this time talking about it. And yeah, thank you. I did seek you down at your position at Asmodee, where you're
Yeah,
still
no problem.
chief for all the nerds, and I'm so happy to hear that. So maybe in the future, if I come up across stuff that you've worked upon, or we're talking about games, would you fancy coming back sometime?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got the treat of the Primarchs in a few books. Well, to be fair, what I would say is please try and talk to the authors for those stories because they're actually novellas rather
Yeah.
than short stories. So it's not the same as putting together a short story anthology, putting together an anthology of novellas. But
Yeah.
if you do want me on, I'm quite happy to come on and talk and
Yeah.
remember things really badly again.
Well, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because A, I'm a completionist, but B, sorry, my brother's just texting me, and I don't know how to turn it off on my computer if anyone can hear a ding. But yeah, and your life they sound like a stalker, but your life looked really interesting. And then I saw you got to work with all these lovely authors. I felt really jealous, but excited to find out what that was really like because they've been such great humans.
Yes,
So, sorry. My brother's just letting me know my mum's fine. So everybody, mum's
good,
fine. Good.
great.
Good. And I did ask a couple. So I've asked. So Jim, I'm going to talk to about his story. Dan's given me that great little Horus overview that I've sent to you. I did ask Graham, but Graham was like, "Well, let's wait till we're talking about another book as well." So and I just think it's fab, and I just hope that people watching will understand if you haven't read a Warhammer novel, like there's so much more to them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just one last thing. So the Horus Heresy, Black Library had existed for the best part of 10 years before the first Horus Heresy book was published. And Black Library was doing great. It was publishing really great Warhammer 40,000 novels, and the sales numbers that they were getting for Horus Heresy books were amazing. And certain people within the business would probably deny it then and probably still deny it now. It was bringing in new people. There were people reading the Horus Heresy books who wouldn't even consider picking up a 40k novel and bringing them into it. And there's a reason why it lasted for so long. Originally, this was planned as I think it was going to be a 12-book series. It was going to be 4 trilogies. That's
Yeah.
what I remember from the first meeting. And it ended. What was it in the end? 60 something books.
Around, yeah, a lot. A lot is what they
Yeah,
say in publishing parlance.
yeah.
Yeah.
It lasted almost 20 years as well. So
Yeah.
not many not many publishers, not many series can make that claim.
Well, yeah. And thank you for being part of my little journey into it. And is there anything you'd like to publicize or push people your way?
Um, not really, Martha. But I've just been working with some guys on a video game, Shadowveil, Legend of the Five Rings. Came out yesterday. It's on Steam. If you remember Legend of the Five Rings from the 90s, you'll absolutely love this. If you remember Legend of the Five Rings from after the 90s, you'll love this. If you like great strategy video games, you'll love this. Shadowveil, it's on Steam. Go there now. Thank you.
Yay! Oh my goodness, that was wonderful. And yes, everyone should run there. But yeah, absolutely lovely to meet you, Christian. Thank you
Yeah,
so
lovely to
much.
meet you. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Let me pause this. Oh, So that was the amazing Christian Dunn, one of those people who was in the rooms when it happened and so generous with his time. Also, after the interview, stopped to give me some advice on who else we should be talking to. So look out for some interviews with other editors and artists from the Heresy as well. And so exciting, such a great little book to taste so much of the Heresy. So yeah. Our next Heresy book is forthcoming, and I can't remember the name of it, but we will see you again soon. As usual, please, please, please do a like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Yeah, we do merch. We have more Naval t-shirts, and I have a Redbubble, or you can, I'm sure some have been advertised to you. But yeah, I also have a Patreon. And yeah, if you go see our Bye to Ian, say hi from me. Thanks so much. Until next time, bye.